Man, oh man, is this a spicy topic. First off, let's get the big news out the way, which is Dungeons confirmed. Yeah, Nintendo themselves talked about Dungeons today on Twitter and on Nintendo.com, confirming that Tears of the Kingdom will indeed upgrade Breath of the Wild like we all hoped for with new dungeons. And some of the quotes from the developers are insanely exciting. But today's video is about that juxtaposed and mixed with leakers saying, no, that's not true, which is very, very, very odd and very, very strange, because we've got Nintendo themselves saying huge dungeons are in, and then we've got people that have played the game and have been playing for a week now saying they're kind of misleading you. So we're going to talk all about it. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from SwitchForce. Tears of the Kingdom is so freaking close, and I don't care what nobody says. This is the most exciting thing ever. We're like a day away. We're like a day away, and it's been years. We're like a day away, and it feels like it's been an entire generation, because we've been waiting since March of 2017 for a new Zelda, and it's finally here. So nothing can rain on my parade, and nothing should rain on your parade, but I do think this is a fascinating topic, and so I really wanted to dive in with you. Let's start off with Nintendo themselves. They're asked, we've only discussed the skies, but this title has its dungeons too, right? Fujibayashi says, yes, we haven't talked about the dungeons yet. They've changed from the previous game. For example, there is a dungeon that connects directly from Hyrule's surface. If you dive from the sky straight into the dungeon, you'll trigger an event. We think this will be a new experience that wasn't possible in the previous game. Totk continues, we've made dungeons unique to their respective environments, so we think you'll be able to enjoy the wide variety of regional characteristics. Takizawa says making a wide variety was pretty challenging. The 4 divine beasts were the dungeons in the last game, and they shared similar designs. This time, the dungeons are huge, and each carry their own regional look and feel, just like traditional The Legend of Zelda games. We think they will provide a satisfying challenge for players. They were certainly a challenge to develop. So the key takeaways here are, these dungeons can be reached from the sky and the ground, which is pretty sick, triggering an event. The dungeons are unique to their environments, and they have a regional feel and look, which is very distinct and different from the divine beasts, which all were mechanical animals like a zoo gone wrong. A cobbler decided to make big animals and then decided to put really generic bosses inside of said animals like he was evil Noah's Ark. This, though, does sound dramatically different. And then the other words I want to key in on are huge. The dungeons are huge this time, meaning they are bigger than divine beasts, which frankly were very small. Now, if we look at what divine beasts didn't do, that normal dungeons do, it was a lot about the complexity of the structure. The divine beasts were basically go into a pretty open, large space, activate like 5 terminals, and voila, you've solved it. Now, you did have to use Link's many Sheikah skills to progress through these spaces, but a dungeon to me, and a dungeon I think to a traditional Zelda fan, is multiple floors, a ton of rooms, small keys, big boss key, maps, compass, right? It's this Rube Goldberg machine. It's an escape room, if you will. There's all sorts of pieces, there's chests that have more than rupees, and there's a progression to it, like you build. It's not all accessible at once, and there's a very defined, okay, you go here, get this item, go here, and that's the other big piece as well. There's usually a very specific item that is found in said dungeon that then can be used for that dungeon. And here's where we have a huge break with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because in these games, we have a slew of powers that are always equipped effectively, right? In this game, we have Ultra Hand, we have Fuse, we have Ascend, and we have Recall. We always have them. There really isn't a place for defined dungeon items in these games. So we understand the differences, but the developers themselves are saying they're huge, they have their own regional look and feel, and they're like traditional Legend of Zelda games. That all sounds amazing until you read the feedback from people who have played the game. Now, I suppose this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I'm not going to talk about specific dungeons or specific bosses or specific encounters, just a response to what Nintendo themselves are officially announcing with dungeons. And from what I've gathered based on reading a bunch of information from people who have had the game for a long time, they are bigger. They do have their own regional look and feel, but they do not have many of the elements I just described as what players and fans would consider a traditional Legend of Zelda dungeon. They do not have small keys. They do not have boss keys. They do not have separate maps and compasses. They do not have a progression through rooms. It much more is a large open space, go and activate some things, and then fight a boss. The great news of this is that they do have their own regional look and feel, and the boss is part of that. No more Thunderblight Ganon, and then all the other blights that all basically function and look and, you know, a little bit different. No, these are original bosses that are specifically linked to their dungeon in their region, which does have a unique structure, unique look, unique feel, and that all is great. But by them saying that they're huge and that they're just like traditional Zelda games, I think they're being a little bit misleading here. It sounds like players who have played say, yeah, they are bigger, but they still wouldn't necessarily call them traditional Zelda dungeons. It really sounds like this is Divine Beast 2.0, which is indeed an upgrade, and they did course correct many of the things that players complained about. The look, the feel, the theming, and the boss. I feel like it's just not possible, or at least Aonuma's team does not feel it's possible, to achieve traditional Zelda dungeon design in the context of an open world Breath of the Wild style game. We don't have the items that we have in Twilight Princess and Wind Waker and Ocarina. We do not have a more linear progression. We have a much more open map, and we have a much more 360-degree approach where you can enter and exit from all sorts of different angles, where you can do things in an order that you see fit, and where you are able to kind of utilize your powers in a way that maybe makes dungeon items expendable. Now, I think it'd be super sick if there was a way to merge the two, but clearly both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom focus on how you use your set of Sheikah powers and then Ultra Hand, Zonai powers to manipulate the world. And it's much more about that world manipulation than it is about specific dungeon, like a hook shot and a boomerang and a mirror. You know, you basically solve all dungeon item problems with your already existing slew of powers. And so I think the Zelda team feels like a traditional dungeon either A, does not fit in this type of game, or B, would break the flow of this type of game, or C, would require too much development time and would be too easy to break. Because a traditional dungeon that has a lot of linear progression needs to be very contained. It needs to be very curated so that you can't sequence break it, right? You have to make sure that when you're activating switches and when you're getting keys and it doesn't break. And utilizing all of these powers, maybe they felt like there's no way to really do a true dungeon justice because of the fact that you have so much more flexibility in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I gotta say, I think it's okay. Like, there's a part of me that's very sad that people have played the game are saying these aren't really the dungeons you've come to know and love. They're like improved Divine Beasts. And part of that does let me down because I was hoping for like the same water temple experience I had way back in Ocarina as a 10-year-old boy. I wanted that again. It was so fun and so mind-opening, and we're not going to get it. But at the same time, I do think that it's okay that this style of Zelda does not fall into the same formula as other Zeldas. I think it's okay that this style of Zelda has its own thing. And if they improve the Divine Beast in a significant way, by addressing the look, by addressing the theming, by addressing the boss, I feel pretty good about that. A lot of players, I think, will miss the keys and the mini-bosses and the way that you progress through dungeons, but at the same time, would you rather have a massive world with tons to do, 3 levels of map, and a whole amazing suite of craftable, buildable, creative powers in exchange for tried and true dungeons? And I feel like after our experience with Breath of the Wild, the answer is yeah, we'd make that trade. We will exchange the traditional dungeon item style linear dungeon for a massive world, 100 hours of gameplay, and an infinite amount of possibility for what we can create and build, break the game, subvert their normal order, go where we want, do what we please, and feel like we are truly in an adventure with Link. So I feel a sense of loss for the dungeons, but now I just am of the belief that this style of Zelda will never have that style of dungeons. And if we want that style of dungeon, we'll have to go back to a more traditional Zelda game. And maybe Nintendo will do that. Maybe after a couple of these open worlds, they will want to go back to a more curated, linear, traditional Zelda game. Whether that's 3D or top-down, I don't know. But I do want to kind of address the fact that Nintendo is being a bit misleading here. If you read their words verbatim, they aren't saying that they do have all those cornerstones of a traditional Zelda dungeon. They are very much focusing on the look and feel. But I think the way that they're kind of brandishing this as a marketing point on their tweet by saying the dungeons are huge, it gives a feel, and they're calling them dungeons, and they know what players believe that to mean and believe that to be. So it kind of puts them in an awkward spot where, yeah, they probably should not be using this verbiage, and they probably should, say that the Divine Beasts have been expanded on in new, challenging themed areas that are similar to dungeons, but I don't think specifically Takizawa's quote about this time the dungeons are huge, I think that's really not true. I think it's being a little bit facetious, a little bit misleading. We'll have to all find out for ourselves, and maybe we'll come to different conclusions. Maybe we'll feel like they're dungeons, but for me, as someone that's been playing Zelda for over 20 years, 25, gosh, I'm old. If you don't have the items, if you don't have the keys, if you don't have that linear progressive structure, you don't have the mini bosses, I don't know that I'd call it a dungeon. Maybe it's an open world, new style dungeon, but I don't think it's a traditional dungeon. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. How do you feel now that dungeons have been officially confirmed by Nintendo, but then clarified by players, and it really ends up being Divine Beast 2.0? I want to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, stay positive out there. Until next time, SwitchForce out.